Let's talk about cultural comparisons. One of the 5 C's of ACTFL is comparisons, and oftentimes in our typical textbook packages, this takes the form of comparing the student's own culture with the target culture. Now, there are some obvious benefits of doing this, right? You can use linguistic structures to make comparisons, as well as learn some things about the target language speaking culture. The problem is really there are 2 major problems with this. One is it assumes that the target language speaking culture is all monolithic. And 2, it assumes the student doesn't come from the target language speaking culture already. And as we often see, especially in Spanish classes with our heritage learners, but sometimes in other languages as well, sometimes a student does come from that cultural background. And sometimes they have the language proficiency to go along with it. And other times they don't, and they're even more self-conscious about it. So encouraging the student to compare their culture with the target language speaking culture is oftentimes a problem, because they might be from that target language speaking culture already. And they might know some things about it. They might know different things about it than are in the book because their culture may not be monolithic. And it may not be correct answers in terms of what's in the book. And it also may cause problems for them if they can't really contrast and compare that because it's the same culture. And in terms of the culture being monolithic, oftentimes there are generalizations that are presented in a book or other standard textbook or curricular materials. And that doesn't necessarily mean that that is true of every single person in the target language speaking culture, because in fact, in terms of Spanish speaking cultures, Spanish is an official language or spoken in more than 20 countries around the world, with second language speakers in more countries than that. And it is very difficult to make generalizations about multiple countries in the Spanish or French or other language speaking world because of that. And so oftentimes a great way to solve both of these problems at once is by narrowing the focus for comparisons to a specific community in the target language speaking regions of the world that has been the focus of a unit. By studying the traditions of a certain community, in particular a certain holiday or festival and how that's celebrated with traditional foods and clothing and celebrations and practices, you can contrast that with something from your own culture, and then it doesn't put the student in the position of having to decide what is their culture. Because even students who aren't necessarily from the target language speaking culture may have more than one culture, and sometimes it's hard for them to decide how best to accomplish the task. While the other students are already writing or recording, some students are still sitting there thinking, which culture do I write about? And so this solves this problem, as well as preventing students from seeing the target language speaking culture as a monolith.